I'm not a lawyer, but let's get into what happened before lunch on day 20 of Diddy's federal criminal trial. Before I get into what happened, it's worth noting that the judge denied the defense's recent motion for a mistrial, which was based on Bryana Bongolan's testimony. Bryana Bongolan is the one who said Diddy hung her over a balcony at Cassie's house. The defense said that the government allowed Bryana to get on the stand, knowing that she was lying about this incident and the day it took place. The defense argued that the government knew or should have known she was lying or perjuring herself because there is evidence that shows that Diddy and Cassie were on the East Coast before, during, and after the time that Bryana says that this incident happened. But today the judge denied the motion for a mistrial for a number of reasons, including saying that because Diddy's defense team was able to properly and vigorously cross-examine her about these issues, there is no prejudice or harm done to Diddy. In other words, because y'all were able to use cross-examination to poke holes in Bryana's credibility and show the jury that Diddy was in New York during the time Bryana said he was hanging her over a balcony in LA, you're good. And the judge specifically calls out Nicole Westmoreland, the attorney who did the cross-examination, by saying, quote, "Miss Westmoreland used this as an opportunity to have a real Perry Mason moment in federal court, had a great cross-examination and blew a hole through the direct examination of Miss Bongolan." And when I tell you that's exactly what she did. And so the mistrial was denied. All right, now let's jump to the testimony. So Jane Doe is brought back to the stand, and just to remind you, the defense's argument with her is that she was a willing and consensual participant in these hotel nights, aka she did it because she wanted to. So early in the cross, defense attorney Tinny Garagos asked Jane if, despite now feeling regret and resentment towards Diddy for hotel nights, if at the time she chose to participate. Jane responds that her choices were made under a lot of emotional pressure, and she acknowledges that at the time she did love Diddy and did not want to break up with him. Jane says, quote, "I was already so hooked from the beginning. I fell in love with somebody who I didn't understand like the terms and conditions of what our relationship would be like. And so once I was hooked into that and I fell in love, but my emotions were in place, so it was many blurred lines of love and affection mixed with emotional pressure to perform these things that my lover really desired, and so I wanted to fulfill my duties as a good girlfriend." Tinny Garagos asked Jane if she kept coming back to Diddy after they would break up or stop talking because of his love and affection and the way that he treated her, and Jane agrees with that. She testified that one of the things she loved was how after hotel nights, she would get to bathe Diddy, cuddle him, give him foot rubs, and turn on his favorite television show, which was Dateline. Well, now that's interesting. Jane went on to testify that she thought hotel nights with Diddy were special and that he was only doing them with her, so she didn't want him to feel judged. She said, quote, "I really wanted to just go along with these things because I felt like if I can be my partner's escape, then I would be. And I didn't want to judge him for the things I noticed in these rooms about his behavior and the things he liked. And I just would kind of put blinders on and just go along with what he was telling me to do." She went on to say that as time went on, it was very conflicting for her because she felt she was breaking all of her own boundaries to make him feel loved. From there, Garagos begins asking Jane about things she and Diddy did with entertainers versus without entertainers. And according to Jane, baby oil, lingerie, narcotics, and role-playing were all things that were done with and without entertainers. But Jane says that while it was her choice to take narcotics, according to her, Diddy would offer them and expect her to take them. Garagos follows that up by asking Jane how old she was when she started dating Diddy, to which Jane confirmed she was 35 years old. Jane also mentions that role play is a thing that they did with and without entertainers. And when they did it with entertainers, Diddy specifically liked cheating role play, where Jane would pretend that Diddy left town and she's left sneaking this entertainer in to be intimate with him. And that's their business. Moving on to breakups and makeups, Garagos asked Jane if the reason she and Diddy would get back together after they would break up is because she missed him. Jane says that they both missed each other, and she also acknowledges that when they would get back together, it was of her own choosing. Next, Garagos spends some time talking about some of the positive attributes of Diddy, to which Jane says that Diddy was confident, strong, boisterous, righteous, and beamed a very bright light. She says he introduced her to gospel because he had a favorite pastor he would listen to, and so the two of them started watching the pastor together and talking about the sermons. She also says that Diddy introduced her to gospel music, and that even after he was arrested, she still carries all of this stuff with her. Moving on to finance, Jane says that at the time she met Diddy, she was making $50,000 a month from Instagram brand deals, depending on how the month went, and then she was receiving $4,700 a month from child support. However, Jane says that once she started dating Diddy, her time and presence was devoted to him and her child, and so her influencer income decreased significantly. Over the 3.5 years of being with Diddy, Jane says she only made 10% of what she could have been making if she hadn't been so focused on him. Geragos asks her if Diddy encouraged and motivated her to work, including by investing $20,000 in a dress line that she has, and Jane says yes. She also agrees that over the course of their relationship, Diddy wired her over $150,000, and she acknowledged that she once told prosecutors that she always gravitates towards providers. When Geragos asks her to expound on this, Jane says, quote, "Yes, I do find men who are successful attractive. As a woman, my ideal partner is a protector and provider." And she agrees that she found those qualities in Diddy. Next up, Geragos highlights that after Diddy and Jane's love contract, the house that Jane moved into required $40,000 to move in, $20,000 for the security deposit, and then another $20,000 for the first and last month's rent. And so the point Geragos is making is that even if Diddy were to stop paying the rent now, the landlord essentially has 3 months of rent already banked for Jane. There's 2 months from the security deposit and then another 10 from last month's rent. So Geragos says that when Diddy was making that offer of giving Jane another 3 months before he cut her off, she would have really been getting 6 months from him. And to this, Jane says, "I never really took that into account. But yeah, now that you put it that way." Geragos continues on, asking Jane more financial questions about their relationship, and so she has Jane describe some gifts that Diddy gave her around the time of their first trip to Turks and Caicos. Jane says around that time, Diddy gave her a pair of shoes, a bag, and a bracelet that said love. This was during the early stages of their relationship, and Jane says Diddy described himself as polyamorous, which she says at first she didn't mind, but as time went on and more feelings got involved, she wanted Diddy all to herself, and she admitted that back in the day, she was a bit colorful with how she described some of the other women in his life. She says seeing Diddy with these other women was upsetting, particularly because of the imbalance in how she says he treated her versus the others. Which leads Tenny Geragos to ask Jane about Diddy's relationship with Carisha, aka Young Miami. According to Jane, Diddy and Young Miami started dating about 6 months to a year after she started dating Diddy. And because Miami and Diddy were so public and posting each other on Instagram, Jane says that it was really hard for her to see that. Specifically, Jane says, quote, "Yeah, it was definitely not something I signed up for. I didn't sign up to date a man that was in a public relationship." In addition to seeing Miami, Jane also says that Diddy was seeing his ex named Gina and somebody named Jesse that he took to London and Wyoming. Now, who is Jesse? According to Jane, all these other women got to go on trips and get gifts. And for Young Miami specifically, Jane says that Diddy would shower her with gifts in public, including the time he got her an all-white Maybach. And Jane acknowledges that seeing Miami's gift upset her, and so she asked Diddy to buy her a Van Cleef necklace and bracelet, which he apparently did. After that, Geragos moves on to asking Jane about Diddy's narcotic addiction and if she noticed it early on. Jane says on their second date, which was to Turks and Caicos, she could tell that Diddy was not taking care of himself. She said his eyes looked like he was developing jaundice, his gums were gray, and his hands were shaking, which she believed came from too much drinking. Jane recalled jokingly telling Diddy that they should take a trip to Thailand so he could go to a rehab facility that's there, but she also says that it took her a while to actually label what he was going through as addiction. She says in the early days, she would just describe it as him being a partier. Next, Geragos asked Jane about the time she started researching this hotel night lifestyle that her and Diddy were living. Jane says in her research, she came upon the term cuckolder, which she says is a man who enjoys watching the woman he's with be intimate with another man. Jane says she was really just trying to understand how and why Diddy could be enjoying this and why he wanted to do it all the time. And so in discovering this word, she also came upon a few explanations as to why a man would want this. She said one reason could be that a man just gets pleasure from watching it, and another reason could be that there's a real curiosity that the man has, but is too ashamed to experience himself, so he lives vicariously through the woman. And talking more about their hotel nights, Jane confirms that she was okay with the hotel nights being filmed and even worked to put on a good show for Diddy because she knew he would watch it later, including asking him if he wanted her to do certain things to the entertainers in hopes of getting him stimulated. Next, Tenny Geragos moves into asking Jane about the times hotel nights ended early after she expressed to Diddy that she was either uncomfortable or unattracted to an entertainer. But while Jane says these nights did happen, she also pushes back in saying that when she would tell Diddy that she was uncomfortable or unattracted to the men, she would still have to try and be with them for another hour or two before Diddy would dismiss them. Next, Geragos gets into the alleged conversation that Jane had with KK about flying with narcotics. If you recall, on direct examination, Jane said that KK told her to just put the narcotics in her check bag and that KK said she does it all the time. So while Garagos is asking Jane about this conversation, Garagos pulls up some text messages between the two of them. She pulls up the text, but it doesn't reference this particular part of the conversation, and so Jane says that it was because it was from a phone call. So Garagos then pulls up some phone records, but the government objects because the phone record she pulls doesn't include interactions that would have been made via Wi-Fi, like a FaceTime. And so Garagos moves on to asking Jane about her relationship with KK. Jane says that the two of them were not close, and she believes that KK had, quote, very strong opinions about me, which influenced a great deal of how Sean treated me. And on that note, they go to lunch. But after lunch, Jane is back on the stand, and Tinny Garagos picks up with asking her about different entertainers that her and Diddy used. Specifically, the two entertainers that Jane reached out to herself. Similar to what she said on direct examination, Jane says that she reached out to these entertainers because she wanted more control over the men who she was going to be intimate with, and she says that Diddy was very encouraging of her to reach out to them. Garagos again is trying to show that Jane was a willing and voluntary participant in these activities, and so then she moves on to highlighting different times that Jane had FaceTime calls and sent graphic text messages to the men. But Jane again says that that was all done at the request of and while Diddy was with her. From there, Garagos has Jane read a text exchange from November 9th of 2021. It's between her and Diddy, and it's after Jane has just told Diddy that she is stimulated for him. Diddy responds, "What you want to do and be explicit," and then Jane responds with some graphic language describing the things she wants to do with entertainers. Jane testifies that she only sent that because she was playing into fantasy talk and because she knows that's what Diddy liked and wanted. As this text exchange continues on, Jane starts talking about going to a store and getting some outfits, and Diddy asks her again, "What do you want to do?" And this time Jane replies, quote, "Spend time with my favorite person." Favorite person meaning Diddy. And then she asks Diddy what he wants to do. And Diddy replies, "Do you want me and Paul to stop by?" Jane tells Diddy yes, and she testifies that she only agreed because that was the only option given if she wanted to see Diddy. Now feels like an appropriate time to mention that Diddy referred to himself, Jane, and Paul as the trifecta and would compare the three of them to sports, saying that Jane was Kobe Bryant, Paul was Shaq, and Diddy was Michael Jordan. Okay. And Jane said that she would flirtatiously and playfully call Paul her boyfriend and call Paul and Diddy her boys. At this point, Tinny Garagos and Jane get into an interesting back and forth. It was after some voice notes of Jane and Diddy were played in the courtroom where the two of them were discussing having a hotel night with two entertainers. But after Jane was on Instagram and saw Diddy was hanging out with another woman while he was texting her about this hotel night, she got upset and started texting him about how mistreated she feels because other women were getting nice gifts and trips and all she was getting was hotel nights. And so in response to this, Tinny Garagos asks her, "Are you mistreated because this other person got a Chanel bag? You didn't get a Chanel bag?" And Jane replies, "No, I only got trauma." Garagos says, "You got a Van Cleef necklace and a Bottega bag." Jane replies, "After 3.5 years, I really don't think I got much from this relationship." And to this, Garagos says, "What is a Bottega bag?" Jane says, "I'm sure you already have one." Garagos says, "I actually don't. What is it?" Jane replies, "It's a high-end luxury purse for women." Garagos says, "How much do the bags cost?" And to this, Jane says, "How much does my body cost?" And then the judge steps in and asks Jane to just respond to the questions being asked. The day ends with more text messages between Jane and Diddy being read. One in particular was shortly after the two of them had a hotel night. And in this message, Jane tells Diddy she wants to get dressed up, drink some wine, and just chill with him. And to this, Diddy replies they don't have to be debaucherous. Debaucherous was another way of them referring to hotel nights. Diddy also tells her that he knows how to be intimate without oils and outfits. Jane tells him she wants to wear some of her own outfits and wear her hair down, which she only notes because his preference was that she wore her hair up during hotel nights. Diddy responds, "Of course," and then Jane says, "We can get crazy the day after." And on the stand, Jane says she only said this because she knew that's what Diddy wanted and liked. Diddy replies, "We don't have to go crazy for the rest of the year." And then Jane responds, "I'll believe it when I see it." The conversation continues on, and Jane tells him, I think there will be debauchery before the end of the year." He says, "We don't have to do it." And then Jane replies, "No, I just know you like it and I don't mind it. I just want some romance time with my baby for a second." Diddy then responds, "Nope, I'm going to make you beg for debauchery." And then the messages continues on and they get a little graphic again, so I'll end here. We'll see what happens on day 21.